Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome all of our listeners to another edition of the Southeastern Alternative Funds Association Spotlight. The SEFA Spotlight is the Southeastern Alternative Funds Association's podcast where we interview practitioners and others in the alternative funds and alternative investment space. And this evening, I am delighted to welcome three guests to talk about the recent Georgia State University hedge fund competition in partnership with the Southeastern Alternative Funds Association and other organizations active in the alternative investment space. So tonight I'm joined by Scott Murray, an associate professor of finance at Georgia State University, and Alexander Francis and Lorenzo Weaver, who are recent graduates and the winners of the 2025 Georgia State University hedge fund competition. Alexander and Lorenzo were teammates, and they are recent graduates, finance graduates from the University of West Florida in Pensacola, Florida. So we're going to get a chance to hear from them here in a moment. But I'd like to welcome all of you to the SEFA Spotlight. And we're going to start with you, Scott. You're the professor that's responsible for organizing the Georgia State hedge fund competition. And so I'd like to start with you, Scott, and get some background on the case competition, how it got started, and where we are at with the competition here in 2025. So I'll turn it over to you to kind of kick things off.
Well, thank you very much, Andres. I'm very happy to be here. So the competition started, at least the current version of the competition started, I think, 9 years ago. So this year was our 9th year. Basically, myself and one other professor, I should give credit to Vikas Agarwal. He's my colleague at Georgia State. He also helps on the Georgia State side, and we get tremendous support and help from SEFA as well. So thank you to our partners there. So the competition started about 9 years ago. Well, this is our 9th year. And the way it works is as follows. We get student teams teams of students from universities all around the world to submit proposals for hedge fund investment strategies. So the idea is that they basically do all the development work related to a strategy that they hope would be of interest to a hedge fund. They write this up, they submit proposals, they submit their strategy in a proposal form that we get evaluated by a team of finance practitioners. So we've got a panel. I think this year we had 37 reviewers. We get several pairs of eyes on each submission, and they're evaluated, they're scored, and they also the students also get written feedback on their proposals. And once all the reviews are in, I tally things up, and we invite the 5 best teams, or hopefully the best, but definitely the 5 highest scoring teams to the final competition, which we hold at Georgia State University's Buckhead Center. And at the final competition, the 5 teams each get 8 minutes to present their proposals to a panel of judges. So the judges are very well established hedge fund industry professionals. And then they have 7 minutes during which the judges grill them on their strategies, the ins and outs. Hopefully make them sweat a little bit, although these guys didn't sweat too much, I don't think. Mm-hmm. And once all 5 teams are presented, the judges go and they deliberate. So nobody knows at that point who the winner is. It's not predetermined. The judges do the deliberation real time. And I should also say the whole thing is completely anonymous. Nobody knew the finalists' names or the universities they're from or anything of that nature. I did, but nobody else. Until after the judges were in the deliberation room. And the judges didn't learn until they came out of the deliberation room. So the judges deliberate. They determine the first, second, and third place prize winners, as well as the remaining 2 finalists we call them finalists. We don't seed those. And then we have a reception at which we, right after the presentations, during which we announce the winners. And the winners all get scholarship prizes, $10,000 for the first place prize, $5,000 for the second place team, $3,000 for the third place team, and $1,000 each for the other 2 finalist teams. And with us today is our winning team, the first place team from this year's competition, Alexander Francis and Lorenzo Weber from University of West Florida. So I'm thrilled to see you guys one more time. And they're both, I think, as Andre said, recent graduates of the University of West Florida. I should say they're following a good tradition there. The University of West Florida has won the first place prize 2 years in a row. Um, so that's fantastic for them, not so good for everybody else. Um, and yeah, so that's basically how the competition works. We do this in collaboration with CIFA. Great team of people at CIFA that help us, and great team of sponsors that support the competition year after year. So it's really a fantastic undertaking. I enjoy doing it. I'm looking forward to the 10th year next year. Maybe we'll do something special. I don't know. I've got to be creative to do that, but maybe we'll do something special for year 10. But that's a summary of how it works.
Fantastic. That's a that's a great synopsis, and I would point out to those that are watching and or listening that a lot of details about what Scott outlined with respect to the case competition, the history, past winners, different participants in terms of judges and sponsoring organizations. There's a number of parties and stakeholders that support Professor Murray, Professor Agrawal, and Georgia State in pulling the competition together. And one of the things that makes it special is that the students get to interact and hopefully interface with real investment professionals across not only the Southeast, but the country, who are participating either as judges or reviewers. And then they all convene, for many of them anyway, convene at the Buckhead Center in Atlanta, Georgia, for this live event where there's a lot of networking, and obviously the students get a chance to highlight the work that they've been busy at, which you're going to hear about here shortly. So I'd encourage folks to check out the show notes after to learn more about how they can bring the competition to their students at their schools, how they can apply for the 2026 edition, because it gets underway fairly quickly once the school year starts in the fall. And the students spend a number of months working on their submissions with a faculty sponsor, and it makes for a really good competition. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the students. That's why we're here tonight. We want to hear from Lorenzo and Alexander. Like last year, one of the things I enjoy is hearing how the team came together, how they worked together through a heavy course load, and obviously in their case, navigating the job search process and graduating. So with that, I want to congratulate Alexander Francis and Lorenzo Weber from the University of West Florida in Pensacola, the winners of the 2025 Georgia State University Hedge Fund competition. Alexander, I'm going to start with you. As we were talking before the show, one of the things we'd love to do is get a little bit of background about each of you. I know that you're both recent graduates, so congratulations, and both were finance graduates. But tell us a little bit about your, academic journey, how you chose finance, and then I'll go to Lorenzo, and then learn a little bit about what you guys actually did in your actual case submission. So we'll start with you, Alexander.
Thank you, sir. As far as academic background, I got in relatively early at PSC. I was lucky enough to get in at about 14. I proceeded through all the general associate requirements, and I was guided with a pretty steady hand by my father. He works in finance, has for 2.5 decades, so that is kind of how I went along with going into finance as well. I figured that if something else came up that I enjoyed, I could do that. But, a financial background necessitates a financial future. After that, I went on to go to UWF beginning in the fall of 2023, I believe. And ever since then, it's just been going well. As far as where I met Lorenzo, he and I have shared a few classes ever since the beginning. It was just kind of unfamiliar, in the same class, didn't really talk all that much. However, we, I believe, met in investments under Dr. K.C. Ma, and things went from there in regards to another project we were working on. That's how we became associates.
Great, great. Well, Lorenzo, tell us a little bit about your academic journey and kind of how you matriculated in the finance track, and then we'll dive into your actual team's submission.
Correct. So I'm the totally opposite of Alexander. I came from Brazil as a student athlete. I started as a general business because I had no idea what I was going to be doing. And I had one class that was something related to accounting, which I like it. I kind of like the financial statements and everything. And then after that, I had a finance class with Dr. Kevin Krieger, and I just fell in love with it. I changed my major in the same week, and was just from there on, I'm passionate about finance. And as Alexander said, we had multiple classes together. But last year, we had opportunity to present a stock pitch in front of the deans and the open public of UWF to pitch about a current stock or industry that we thought that the industry should invest their money that they have in the fund on. So that's where me and Alexander kind of got closer together.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, what we'd love to do is dive into the actual idea that you presented to actually participate, and then also, eventually present in front of a live audience and a group of judges. As Scott said, the judges are comprised of hedge fund industry investors and alternative investment professionals. Many of them are capital allocators, or are in charge of manager research and due diligence, and so look closely as far as a career and making a living at different investment opportunities and investment strategies. So whenever we get a chance to talk with the teams or hear from them, we know that the groups have gone through a pretty rigorous review process to get to Atlanta, and then obviously to be selected from the five. We know that they're not not handing out those first place prizes and those checks easily. So, Alexander, I'll start with you. Tell us, if you could, kind of a summary of the case, or the paper, or idea, I guess, that you guys worked on, you and Lorenzo, and some of the background and the idea.
Thank you. We began by attempting to examine connections with how we can make an investment strategy more risk averse while maintaining profits. And it was originally conceived with actually Lorenzo's portion of the stock pitch. He had pitched a logistics company, and sorry, not a logistics company, but the concept of investing in an AI supply chain. And then he and Dr. Casey Ma, who has experience managing hedge funds, began to think, how can we apply this not just to artificial intelligence stocks, but to all stocks? So we came up with the central supply chain strategy, central supply chain momentum strategy, to be specific. I apologize. Which the basic idea is by finding a central supply chain, meaning that it has a high degree of interactions of buyers and sellers, and then extending out in a 7-node chain with each company being part of that node, then we can find links between companies that aren't just purely financial. They're actually based on who they do business with. Because, manufacturing and labor hours, that's a key leader of the economy. So if we can find who they're buying and selling to, then no matter how well the company does, they're going to have a positive correlation with each of those companies. So when the other companies do well, the entire chain does well. It also allows us to have kind of an intermediate option because there's industry investing and stock investing. So by finding a supply chain, we find that option in the middle that allows us to long top performers and short bottom performers. In a broad scope sense, in a single sentence, we are securing and stabilizing our investments by tying them in with manufacturing and logistics. Because no matter how poorly or perfectly any company does, because they are actively doing business with each other, they are going to have strong links with each other because it's indeterminate of financial performance because they're the direct customers and suppliers.
Yeah, interesting. So the creation, I guess, of the investment thesis, and then part of the case competition is you have to ultimately get your idea down on paper, present it, and then be in a position to present it live, as far as like a pitch competition in front of in front of a panel of judges. So Lorenzo, let me turn to you. So it sounds like you had some of the original stock ideas. What was the foundation for studying, I guess, supply chains and the industries and manufacturing and that space in the first place?
Correct. So whenever Dr. Ma called me to be part of the presentation, we always do a brainstorm to see what's going on in the market, what are the trends, and AI has been for like 2 or 3 years now, and tech has been the move. Like we all see Nasdaq returns and everything. So me together with Dr. Ma, we developed AI strategy, no, not AI strategy, AI supply chain that we presented last year. And building from that, after it got accepted and we had multiple comments about it, I just loved working with Alexander Francis. And Dr. Ma also called me and Alexander to kind of come up with an idea for the hedge fund competition. And then we, like you said, we sit in a chair for hours and hours and hours to try to see a way that we can apply the strategy and develop the strategy way more so we can apply it to every single supply chain.
Yeah. Scott, maybe I'm going to have you jump in here because I'd like to get the perspective of how the faculty at the respective schools and universities that are basically, it sounds like sponsoring the students in a way, and serving as an advisor to the students throughout this process. Tell us a little bit about the context and what the expectation is of the faculty, because it seems that the students will greatly benefit, in this case, from having a professor that has a hedge fund background and is familiar with different hedge fund investing strategies, but also is familiar with the competition and knows what's going to be expected and involved in terms of a winning entry, right? So you've mentioned University of West Florida is now two-time winners. And when people think of candidly financed schools, right, they often go to the Whartons and the Ivy Leagues of the world, and those schools are not excluded from applying. But we have students that are talented all over the world, and this is a global competition, as I'm sure you can share. But talk to us a little bit about the role of the faculty and the faculty sponsor, and why that is so important in helping the students be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, this is a global competition. I should have mentioned that before. So it's open to undergraduate, masters, even PhD students from all over the world. And we have had submissions. This year we had submissions from all over the world about the United States, North America. I think we had Canada as well, Europe, Asia. We've had a team from Africa submit. So we've had teams from every continent, well, except for Africa, North America, the U.S., Europe, and Asia be finalists. So we've had teams from all over the place be successful, teams from all over the place enter. We've had this year, I think every single finalist team was an undergraduate team. So competing against master students, and I don't think we had any PhD teams this year, but in the past we have. The role of the faculty members really, I think, varies from school to school. I think, Alexander and Lorenzo probably have a gold mine down there with Professor Ma. He has put together several good teams in the past. And I think, I did not know until learning this from you guys a few minutes ago that he teaches a course that I guess probably everybody who has entered the competition under his guidance has taken, and I suspect he does a very, very good job with it. Basically, the role of the faculty advisor is to guide the students through the process of putting together a proposal. And putting together a proposal is quite a daunting process for students, even master students, even, frankly, I'm guessing most professionals. You have to come up with the basic kind of economic idea underlying the strategy. And in this case, I think the idea was that basically, performance at one firm permeates along the supply chain. Um, and there's some market inefficiencies there. Very John, I don't want to speak to their strategy, but that's what I gathered from it. But an economic idea is not enough. You have to say, okay, once I have this, how do I trade if my idea is correct? So you've got to take the economic idea or the hypothesis and develop a trading strategy. And then you've got to say, well, let's see if this has worked historically. At least in most cases, we encourage the teams to test their strategies historically. So you've got to have the skills to collect data, run a simulation, and then you've got to do your analysis to see whether your strategy generates performance, risk-adjusted performance, and assess the risks, assess the liquidity considerations, assess the capital requirements, assess all these sort of things. And this is really what's expected of the proposals. And we see that the finalists consistently deliver on kind of all of these dimensions. And I can tell you, as someone who's advised several teams at Georgia State, just getting to the finish line is a tremendous task. Doing it well is even more so, and finishing first is, it's quite an accomplishment. And I think, as someone who organizes the competition, my big hope, and it really is a professor, my big hope is that, you guys are talented enough. I'm sure the money's great now. You're just out of college. It seems like a lot of money, but in the long run, that money's not going to mean much to you. In the long run, I think you'll find that the experience of doing this before you got out of college once gave you a leg up in the job market, in the labor market. And when you went in and interviewed and you understood concepts like alpha and liquidity considerations and all these sort of things, and were able to talk about them coherently, my hope is that just introducing you to those concepts, which is really in the end the advisor's job, is to introduce the concepts and then let you run with it. My hope is that gives you an advantage in the labor market. That's what the experience is really supposed to give to students. So I've digressed a little bit, Andres, from your question, but
no, that's helpful context. I mean, it gives a real world dimension to a conversation that, it's important to understand the ramifications and the implications of the winning team and the life experience, and more importantly, perhaps the like you said, then the money is the ability to take this and talk about it in an interview, talk about it in the context of a career in finance, or trying to land a coveted job at a hedge fund or an asset management firm. So Scott, you did also a good job of kind of giving an overview of the process, right? It's one thing to have an economic idea. It's another thing to turn that into a strategy that you can trade, that you can back up with a back test and evidence that it worked or works. And then, overview of risk. And then, how is it expressed in terms of how do you sell the strategy? How do you explain it to a potential investor? So there's a lot of dimensions. So Alexander, maybe I'll come back to you. So the economic idea of, the supply chain, and there's, let's say, connections in these nodes. How did you take that and then start to turn it into something that represented a trading strategy or an investment idea?
A couple of different ways. The first is that it is kind of something that's already done in finance, of just narrowing down top performers in an industry. The more difficult part was finding out, okay, well, we found a top performer. How does that connect to another top performer? And sometimes they just wouldn't. But thankfully, in our case, we found a couple of examples. Like, for example, kind of going along with my earlier comment about firms that are connected with each other, we mentioned Amazon. Amazon, you would think, connects to other larger companies because it sells their products, but that isn't how they work in their actual operations. In their operations, we found UPS as a shipping company And International Paper is a packaging company. International Paper sells the cardboard boxes they use to them, whereas UPS is a direct shipper of them. So that's generally what we mean by they're actively doing business with each other. And that also gives us some insulation of risk, because let's say Amazon and the entire industry it's in takes a hit. Well, we have shipping and we have manufacturing paper products that are industry independent. So they don't have to be related. Now, regarding how we can apply that to an investment trend, it means that more or less we have the risk insulation already taken care of. We don't have to worry about it as much. That means that if something on the chain performs badly, then, oh no, 6 out of 7 of our chains are doing great. It ends up not being as large of a problem.
Lorenzo, I want to come to you on what Scott talked about is so critical when it comes to these competitions. I've been to them before, and the judges really do hit the students with a lot of questions, from the quote unquote real world, right? A lot of the students have done a lot of back testing. They have access to Bloomberg and other data through the universities and the finance departments if they're fortunate. And they have to be very creative, as Scott said, in terms of using their time to manage not only course load, but actually to build a robust idea and then be able to, fully vet it. And I've seen firsthand the judges are hitting them with a lot of really tough questions. So I want to come to you as you guys came together and started to put this idea together. What are some of the things that you had access to or that you utilized to really start to, I guess, test the idea and determine if it was there was enough data to support and analysis to support your initial sort of economic thesis? And what are some of those examples that you could share with us?
Yeah, thankfully, like you said, we had the access to Bloomberg Terminal, which we got most of our data from. We also use Yahoo Finance to get the weekly closing price, and I also use Y Finance, which it's a Python language, not a Python language. It's like a Python website that you can transfer all this data to there. I use Data Camp because I was totally new with coding. I did Data Camp, which is a website that learns people how to code and analyze data for 2 or 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. And also ChatGPT. A lot of ChatGPT to help me coding because it just accelerates the process so much. After that, we have a broad access to information about the industry strategy, which is we had, whenever people revealed our paper, they were really concerned that was just another way of saying industry strategy. But backtesting and through everything that we did, we could prove that our strategy over the 14 years that was the sample, the average return was 29% a year. I'm sorry. On the other hand, the industry strategy is just 14%. So we double the industry strategy. And so on. Yeah. But coding was one thing that I learned so much on these. I had no idea. And just through these websites and the internet and ChatGPT, it's crazy what you can do.
Using different resources. Yeah, that's consistent with what we heard from the team, last year. I think one of the things that I've also heard at the case competitions is, the judges really push the students to have the ability to defend their paper and ideas when it comes to risk and risk management, right? Because a lot of people think investing is about making money, which it is, and creating alpha or finding alpha in the market. But a lot of it is also not losing money, right? Rule number one, as we've all heard from Buffett and Munger, don't lose money. That's like principle number one. So maybe you could start, Alexander, and feel free to jump in, Lorenzo. Talk about risk management and your strategy, because any good hedge fund, out there, generally the strategies are selected for a variety of different purposes. Not only finding alpha, but also providing diversification. And when the market is going down, right, some of the strategies are designed to buffer the portfolio or provide return in the portfolio from that standpoint. So talk a little bit about risk management and how you applied risk concepts, either from your coursework or from the advice you got from your advisor, Professor Ma, in that context with your idea.
Thank you, sir. And to springboard off of Lorenzo's information and data, we were positive in 14 out of the 14 years that we tested it. We did not lose money a single time annually. And even in a week-by-week rate basis, we had a roughly 80 to 85% chance of it working successfully.
Yeah,
The
betting
longest streak of loss that we had was 3 weeks, and then it immediately corrected itself. And on it being weeks, it's a weekly investment strategy. It being weekly isn't necessarily something that we intentionally picked out. We just tested a variety of gathering data from previous closing prices and predicting closing prices going forward, and investing in it week by week ended up being the most optimal choice. A way we manage risk using this strategy is by determining the closing prices, for the rest of the week from today and examining the trends in the previous week. We can choose whether to apply the strategy in the given week, or we can choose not to and to just wait for more optimal conditions. The slight disadvantage of that strategy is that if you have it going week by week, you kind of might miss a lightning in the bottle moment, kind of like NVIDIA. However, depending on that is getting dangerously close to attempting to time the market, which we ultimately want to avoid. As far as risk management goes, that is kind of what was our linchpin, is that it's a combination of being connected directly to manufacturing. So, it's not like an investment company where if a particular company is doing badly, it will do badly. A way that I can kind of summarize it is the pure financials of the strategy is like concrete, and the logistics component's like rebar. It's just reinforcing something that's already working. And it going in a week by week basis, we effectively have a shut off switch if the predictions aren't looking good, where we just are like, okay, it's not panning out so far. We can just wait. And even whenever it was performing badly in that 3-week period, it was able to correct itself because of how interconnected everything is and how resilient the strategy is related to the market. Even it was a generally just not good time for the market. It wasn't during COVID, I don't believe, but it was in the small crash that occurred after COVID a few years later, which, if the entire market's doing poorly, then it's going to do slightly less well.
Yeah, Lorenzo, I'd love to maybe take you back to the night of the live presentations in Atlanta, right? So if you set the scene, tell us a little bit about coming to Atlanta, right? What was that experience like? Because I'm sure for students that will listen, as I hope they will, who maybe aspire to participate in the competition in the future, right? Tell us a little bit about what that experience was like coming to Atlanta the day of, and then getting ready to go in a room full of unfamiliar faces and industry people, hopefully people that you can make connections with, but also that you're presenting to for a lot of prize money, right? As Scott said, $20,000 was handed out to the 5 teams. So maybe take us through what was going through your mind as you guys prepared, and how did you prepare for the final presentation?
Yeah, so like we said earlier, me and Alexander, we were based in Pensacola. So we drove one day earlier to Atlanta. It was a 5-6 hour drive, which was really good because we were testing each other the whole time about questions and whatnot. So we got there later at night, and we rehearsed for like 1-2 hours, and we woke up the next day. We were nervous. Of course we were. I texted Dr. Murray to see what time we could go there to have a first look of the place and where we'd be staying before we present and whatnot. We saw the rooms, and we met him. We went back, rehearsed more for 1 or 2 hours. We were rehearsing the whole day. So we got back there with more or less 1 hour before the presentation, and we stayed in our little room. And luckily, very luckily, we were the 4th group to present out of the 5th. So we
Okay.
just could watch the presentation of the fifth group, which was really unlucky. So we went, we presented. It was really good, really good. We did a really good job. Alexander did amazing answering all the questions. I was there. We prepared so much for the questions. Was our major concern of the whole competition. But
Yeah.
not a single question that we thought about was asked. So
Okay.
we,
Yeah, I
we
was
had a
getting
lot
ready
of
to ask.
content.
I was getting ready to ask, was there a curveball thrown to you, or Scott? Maybe you can set the scene for us. I know that you've worked extremely hard over the 9 years to help promote the case competition because of the importance and the opportunity that it affords students. Most importantly, right? That's why we're doing this, to hopefully not only hand out prize money that's actually donated or given by industry organizations who support the scholarship pool, but also for the students to make connections with people in the industry that hopefully can help open doors, et cetera, and then to gain that real valuable experience that they can take with them. So maybe Scott, you could set the stage. What does that day of look like, and the event itself, and maybe you can take us through the teams get enough, you said a few minutes, and there's multiple judges, a panel of judges. Nobody knows where the students are matriculating from. They may not know the strategy. So maybe set the scene for us a little bit. Because one of the things that I think would be valuable is for people listening, whether they're sponsoring companies, whether they're aspiring students that want to participate, is for them to walk away from this conversation knowing that, whether you're a student at a small school, and not in the US, or maybe not a quote unquote target school, that this is a huge opportunity for the students and for the faculty at those schools to really put themselves on the map, and to get practical experience that could hopefully propel them into their careers, whether it's in industry or academia or beyond. But I think you answering some of those questions sometimes can be enough for a student who is otherwise nervous to be in a room full of professionals to even start the process.
Yeah, so let me hit on one thing that you mentioned there. In terms of the teams that have been successful, we have had teams from all the schools you might think would apply. These teams apply, and traditionally, frankly, they haven't done as well as one might expect. This year's finalists, we had University of West Florida, as you know, the winners. We had University of Idaho, Morgan State University, which is a school in Baltimore,
Mm-hmm.
Georgia State University. So Georgia State, we've been to the competition many times. We run it, obviously. I do keep those two aspects completely separate, even though I'm
Sure.
involved in all parts of it. But we made it for the first time as finalists. And North Central College, which is once again a small school after. Um, so, and in the past, we've had, like I said, schools from Europe, schools from all over the place, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
the usual suspects, is the big point. So the day of, so what we do as the competition is we are able to put the students up in hotels the night before and the night of. So the students typically arrive the day before the competition. I'm there pretty early the day of the competition setting up, and I give the students a chance to come by and see the room they'll be presenting in. See the room. We have little breakout rooms that we let them hang out in where they can practice their presentation. And, we turn the heat up in there to about 85.
Try to get them comfortable, right?
Get them lathered up.
In their green room.
Yep. Get them nice and toasty. But the setting is really just a classroom, and the judges sit in the front row. They've got a few screens that their presentation projects onto, and they stand up there and they have to present. And these guys and all the teams, frankly, were very well rehearsed. They were very polished presentations. But as you know, where it can go really wrong is in the judge or the questions from the judges.
Yep.
And I'd be lying if I said I remember exactly what the judges asked you guys, but clearly you handled the questions well. And I'd be very curious to hear, because the thing, anytime you write this sort of paper and you write this sort of, do this sort of analysis, you always know much more about it than anybody else possibly could. So you probably prepared to answer all the really tough questions that you knew things, oh, this is where we could really get burnt. And you said the judges didn't get you on any of those. So, man, I don't know. I'd love to hear what we missed or what the judges missed.
Yeah, maybe you could start, Alexander. So that sounds like you were very prepared, very very well rehearsed. You had time to do so, and that's credit to your preparation that you had a lot of the things maybe thought through. But what were some of the things that they didn't ask or were surprises?
Thank you. And before I answer that, if I could go off of what Lorenzo was saying earlier, which thank you, Lorenzo. One of the things that helped us the most is two things: is we had an innovative but grounded concept. There was one concept that we saw at the actual presentation that attempted to use half-life decay, like from radiology studies, as a way to connect to investment performance. The only issue that was encountered with it is that it ultimately was just using an algorithm to predict the market, which it didn't really tie into the concept as well. Whereas ours of just applying logistics to finance was inventive enough for it to be noteworthy, but it was also grounded in an, oh, I can see how that would work. And you could ask just about anybody on the street and they could see how it would work. Another thing is clearly delegating responsibilities. Like I walked in on Lorenzo going over the data and code, and I tried looking at it for about 3 minutes and nearly got a tension headache. So he is much more technically inclined, whereas I've got a history in service, I've got history in sales and in public speaking. So I was able to answer a majority of the broad scope questions, and I got assistance from Lorenzo in more technical questions. And going off of that into the questions asked, one thing that we were anticipating was we were looking a bit too closely into the minutia of kind of questions they asked. We were prepared for them to ask questions about the formula we used. How do we find the formula? How do we apply it? Whereas a lot of what they asked was significantly more practical and a lot less technical. It was less along the lines of, okay, well, how does it work? And it was more in the lines of, okay, why would we do this? Why does it work? Why should we even try this?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of took us off guard for a moment because we kind of got tunnel vision. We were looking so closely at the details that it kind of threw us off to have such a broad question be asked. But ultimately, we knew what we were talking about, and we could just kind of step back and answer it once we got into a flow of things.
Yeah. I mean, it would it wouldn't surprise me for judges who are coming out of looking at lots of different investment ideas in the real world sense, allocating capital on behalf of clients or investing in different asset classes, to say, why should we spend time on this particular idea? Like, is it something that can make us money? Is it something that can protect our portfolio?
Exactly.
Before we jump into how's it work, how did you put the formula together, etc. Lorenzo, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the importance, I guess, and kind of building off of what Alexander said. You clearly have strengths in different areas, and it sounds like that made for a really great team dynamic. What advice would you give to a student out there who really loves the code, loves the more hardcore finance, right? Like the more technical, analytical aspects of the finance field. Like, what advice would you give them that you learned maybe about the sales side or the presentation side or building your ideas to a point where you can present them to your boss or superiors? Like, what would you say to those students out there that maybe share your background about what you've learned?
So what I learned that stick me to the most was the way that we kind of set everything up to present to these people. We know they're very well-known people, very knowledge people, but for our strategy, they don't know anything about the supply chain. We had a huge strategy, We had so many things that have to add up to work. And first, the hard part was she put out the strategy in a 5-page document. That was one of the hardest things. And then when we come there, we have to summary it down a little bit in the beginning to first get their attention and kind of introduce to them little by little. But always we cannot use, we had to use the right on the dot vocabulary so they don't think we are kind of lowering the way that we see them. You know what I mean?
We don't
We have
want
to
to come
explain
across as condescending.
Sure.
exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So build on that. We the PowerPoints. It's another thing. Most of what we saw, not of what we saw, but what other people said after in the dinner we had after the presentation, they said that our PowerPoints would right on the dot. It was just a black screen, white writing, just the main points that connect to it, and we explain the rest. Like people are going to look at our PowerPoints, and they're going to try to understand our PowerPoint. That they're not going to understand our PowerPoint, neither what we are saying. So you also have to find the right balance there.
You want
Yeah.
to keep the graphics. You want to keep the graphics simple. A lot of you don't want to be loud in the graphics because it doesn't need to be that much. Like you don't need fancy transitions. You don't need very nice templates because ultimately they're finance people. If they were interested in graphics, they'd be in art, and we want to have the exact concepts that are related to what we're talking about come up, and just black background, maybe a change in font color is the most extreme thing we did. It does not need to be overstated. The information is good. Let the information be good.
Sure. Well, I have two additional questions. One, I'm going to come to Scott, and then I'm going to give Alexander and Lorenzo the final word. Scott, I'd love for you to maybe give a comment around the biggest things that you've found the students have learned about this process. They may not win. They may win, right? They may not get to the finals. They may get to the finals. But clearly, you've done this for 9 years, and you've had a lot of interaction, I'm sure, with different faculty, advisors, and teams that have come to Atlanta to present. If you could sort of summarize what you feel the participants are gaining from this experience, and hopefully what future students, whether they be undergrad all the way through doctorate candidates, like what are the objectives, if you will, that you would put out there that teams could expect they'll learn and gain from going through this process, which is many months before they ultimately arrive in Atlanta if they're selected.
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing, and Alexander kind of hit on this with his comment, I think, is getting to do something practical. In the universities, we are academic institutions. We teach the equations, we teach all sorts of theories and stuff that may or may not hold in the real world, but we don't necessarily teach the application. And a lot of that, the reason for that is many of us, I do have some industry experience. I started my career working for a few hedge funds in portfolio management and risk management, but a lot of us in academia don't have experience in the practitioner world. A lot of going back, hitting on the point that you made before about the advisors, the faculty advisors. What we do see a lot of times is teams with faculty advisors that do have a foot in industry. So a lot of clinical professors, a lot of folks who came from industry and joined the academies for whatever reason. They have the practical experience. They know how things work in the real world. And they can impart this knowledge on the students. And I think, going through the whole process, you start to think about all of these considerations that we don't necessarily in the classroom teach all of them, and we don't certainly probably don't put them all together in a completely cohesive way, the way you're forced to do, both for the competition and, as far as I understand it, um, in practice when you're developing an investment strategy.
Yeah.
So I think bridging that gap is something that the competition is designed to do, well designed to do, I hope, and I think reasonably successful at. And I think, um, you know, if you don't make the finals, that's fine. You still get written feedback, and some of the judges, some of the reviewers do give very substantial written feedback to the teams. And that helps the teams, the students who I never see them at the finals, but helps them understand how the real world is thinking about this stuff. You come to the final competition, you present in front of judges, you get the questions. As we heard from Alexander and Lorenzo, the questions were not things they had anticipated. Why hadn't they anticipated them? Probably because we didn't teach them to think that way in the classroom. Because you need to get outside the classroom to get this sort of experience. And I think that is probably the primary way that the competition adds value to the students' lives. Is getting them some practical experience before they hit the labor market.
Yeah, and hopefully a little bit of pocket change if they become real successful hedge fund managers, or analysts, it like you said, the money is probably nice, and we all know the well documented costs and attending higher education and university and tuition has increased substantially. So the generosity of the sponsors and the donors to the competition, I know, is meaningful for the students, and so they deserve recognition. And I would encourage all the folks listening or that are interested in supporting the Georgia State Hedge Fund Competition, CIFA. As far as our organization, we have a lot of crossover with our board members and our sponsors who serve as judges or who have served as reviewers, and also maybe even financially are supporting the competition, because it can't survive without all of these different stakeholders, right? Academia, the private sector, the students, the faculty, obviously all coming together. So I would encourage folks to go to the Georgia State Hedge Fund competition website, which you can find on online, and you can read about the competition and the key dates and get in touch with Scott and learn more about how your school and students can get involved. I want to give Alexander and Lorenzo the final word. As we've talked tonight about your strategy and the process you've gone through over the last year, culminating in your win, which we're all super proud of and happy for you. But I want you to maybe talk a little bit about where you want to go next, and some of the things that you maybe learned about this field or this industry from this process, and how you're hoping to use this and some of the other things like your degrees in finance as a springboard to what's next. So whether you are working already in your full-time position or searching for your full-time position, maybe you could tie sort of what's next with the experience you just had. And I'll start with you, Alexander.
As far as what's in the future for me, immediate future would be I am pursuing a general MBA at the University of West Florida. At some point in the future, I would like to move on from my current occupation into a more financial related occupation, probably something along the lines of insurance, hoping to get a 215. Ultimately, I would like to probably work as a financial advisor, either corporate or personal. Sorry, not corporate or personal, corporate or private.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my father does, built-in mentor. He's willing to train me. I am very eager and accepting of this. Working on the project itself was an honor, and I hope to bring honor to the school as well.
Fantastic. Lorenzo, how about you?
So I'm here in Miami doing an internship at the moment. I'm a financial analyst / financial advisor for a very big Brazilian company. Thanks to the hedge fund competition, I met one of the CIFA members, which is Robert Klein, and he gave me a very good opportunity to take a hedge fund class and an alternative class this summer. So I started this last week, and it's just been amazing. in the future I want to work in hedge fund, but I understand that right now I believe I have a lot to learn in this field, and I'm just really thankful for the opportunity that Robert Klein is giving me. And let's see where it goes. But only thanks to the hedge fund competition.
Well, and maybe to put a bow on this whole conversation, I can provide a perspective. So I know Robert, and I had a conversation with him recently. He reached out through our, the mutual networking that we do in our industry. And I think, one of the things I'd love to add is I think it's so important for people in our industry to also look out for the next generation and look for opportunities to provide young professionals, whether they be, students or recent graduates, with an opportunity to just get exposure to the fields, right? I went to a non-target school, if you will, didn't have access to a ton of professional networks. And really it's been through the people I've met through CIFA and the organizations like CIFA and the connections with universities where I've been able to meet people like Robert. And then when you talk to them, you find there's common ground around whether it's teaching a course as an adjunct, or it's offering students opportunities to get exposure to internships. I work in private wealth management today, so to hear Alexander talk about that as a potential field is easy to say, hey, call me, anything I can do to provide insight. I think that's another practical takeaway that Scott has talked a lot about over the years, is hopefully helping the students meet and interact and connect with professionals who can open doors for them. And I think that's some of the power of CIFA and the Georgia State Hedge Fund competition as well, that can come practically from students if they matriculate from all over the world to Atlanta for a couple of nights, right? You get to interact in a classroom setting, go to dinner, hopefully, meet and interact with some of the judges and reviewers during the networking reception. So all of that to say, I hope we can do this for another, 10 years, Scott, and look up Lorenzo and Alexander, 10 years from now, and see that they're looking for opportunities to give back and support not only their schools, but, the analysts that are coming up behind them to create, this kind of nice flywheel effect. With that, I'd like to thank our winners, Alexander Francis, Lorenzo Weber from the University of West Florida in Pensacola. Congratulations on winning the Georgia State Hedge Fund Competition 2025. I want to thank Scott Murray, Associate Professor of Finance at Georgia State University's J. Mack Robinson College of Business. He and Professor Vikas Agrawal, who's a board member for CIFA, are the two gentlemen and their colleagues who have really powered the hedge fund competition now coming up on a decade. So without their hard work and dedication, the competition wouldn't be what it is today. And then obviously the sponsors and judges and reviewers who donated a lot of their time over the last year to get the competition to a successful conclusion this spring, and hopefully to set it up for an even bigger and big celebratory 10th year in 2026. So we will put a lot of details of the competition in our show notes for the CIFA Spotlight podcast. It'll be available on the CIFA website later this week, here in early June. And we'll also make sure to put your information, Scott, in the show notes so people can reach out and get in touch, and connections for how people can learn more about Lorenzo and Alexander and the paper that they submitted. So with that, gentlemen, I'll sign off for now. I want to thank you for joining us on the CIFA Spotlight, and I wish you not only a safe and happy summer, but to the two of you young gentlemen, a very prosperous and good start to your budding careers. Thank you all
So much.
Thank you, Andres.
It was a pleasure.
Likewise, sir.